I'm Susheela Varky. I am the domestic and sexual violence attorney for Virginia Poverty Law Center. And Virginia Poverty Law Center is the statewide legal aid. So that's different than local legal aid that provides civil legal services. So what's the local legal aid that serves you all?
It's out of Danville,
Virginia Legal Aid?
Virginia Legal Aid Society.
Yeah. So unlike some of the local legal aid attorneys who would be in court on a regular basis representing low-income people on various civil issues like divorce, for domestic violence victims, say an eviction procedure, something like that. The attorneys at Virginia Poverty Law Center are focused on the whole state. We get unrestricted funding, which allows us to lobby when the General Assembly is in session and lobby in general on various issues. So we have attorneys who work on different issues. I work on domestic and sexual violence. We have a healthcare attorney. We have an elder law attorney, housing, consumer law, public benefits. And the General Assembly is getting ready to start, so what we're responsible for is following that procedure, trying to improve laws, prevent bad laws that hurt our clients from passing. And then the rest of the year, we do trainings on what those new laws are, how to implement them, and that kind of thing. The folder that you have, so you should already have copies of the PowerPoints we're going to refer to today, but the folders you have in them some additional materials, and we'll go over what's in them when we get to that. I do want to mention that the folder itself, I'm sorry, I'm walking away from the camera, but the folder itself is the Community Solutions to Sexual and Domestic Violence title. What that is a website that represents our GEEP grant, our grant to encourage arrest and enforcement of protective orders. It was also called the Community Defined Solutions Grant. Melissa and I, plus staff people from the Department of Criminal Justice Services, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance are all part of the state partnership to improve policies and procedures. So if you go to, it's communitysolutionsva.org, you should be able to see the concept was to have a one-stop shopping for domestic and sexual violence resources, publications. You know, I post new PowerPoints there so people can use them, that kind of thing. A one-stop shopping source for your domestic and sexual violence service needs. So that's why we're sharing these awesome folders with you that the Action Alliance made. And as one of the projects that I'm being funded for under that GEEP grant, one is to improve limited English proficiency petitioners' access to protective orders. So I'm hoping that at some point during today's presentation we can talk a little bit about those clients, how many you're seeing, if that's a service that is going to be helpful to you, and how we can figure out how to make that partnership work in the future. So let Melissa introduce herself and we'll start.
I am Melissa Mcmenemy. I am with the Office of the Attorney General, and I am the statewide facilitator for victims of domestic violence and the Domestic Violence Initiatives Coordinator at the office. Like Susheela, I'm part of the CDSG grant. I also have the VSTOP grant, that's my primary grant. And we have the Address Confidentiality Program, and I also do some human trafficking work. That's primarily what I do. Through the ACP, I don't know if you're all familiar with Address Confidentiality, but that is for victims of domestic violence. We give them a substitute address to use in lieu of their physical address, and they can reroute their mail to us. It's a great program, and I will go more into it later on into our presentation today. I also do a lot of brochures. We have, as we mentioned to you, plenty in Spanish. Like I said, my primary is the VSTOP grant. Through that, one of my populations that I work with, or work with the state on, because I work at the state level, is the Latino population, which is, you have a pretty large one here in Martinsville, if I remember correctly. So it's good, and then we have plenty of Spanish brochures that we can send out to you regarding domestic violence and protective orders. Through the Jeep grant, we have the protective orders, what everybody should know about protective orders brochure, which is actually for respondents, not petitioners, although I've noticed a lot of petitioners do have them because it shows them what they, you know, it outlines what can, should and should not be done once a protective order is issued. And it's supposed to be handed out to respondents so that they know not to violate the law. Every courthouse received last year, or the beginning of this year, so hopefully we all have them. If not, we will let me know, and I'll get them to you. And, you know, mostly we do trainings. I set up trainings and do some presentations, not many. This is an opportunity. It's the first time I've actually done one with Susheela.
Great.
But primarily we set up trainings throughout the state. I try to rotate where we go in the state so we can get everybody on board to various trainings. And usually my statewide conference is in November, and every year it's a different violence against women topic. Again, we do a lot of human trafficking, which I've worked on several trainings for that. We have that coming up in May, a statewide conference in May that we're planning for that. And I think that is the majority of everything.
Can I ask a question about
Yes.
human trafficking, please?
Sure.
How widespread, I know we're doing a lot of trainings, but how widespread are the actual cases?
They're all over the state. They just set up back in November, we just established a human trafficking task force for the Western District of Virginia, which includes this area. They're breaking it out into different smaller task forces so they're more regionalized, because the Western District, based off of the U.S. Attorney's Office, is a really large district, and there's just too much. But there are cases scattered throughout the Western District. Now, Northern Virginia has a large human trafficking. We have some in Central Virginia, Richmond area, and Hampton Roads is seeing as well. And there are task forces in all those three areas as well. But it is.
And are those being prosecuted on a federal or state level at this time?
Both.
Are they coordinating
Yes.
with the Attorney General's office, or?
It's the U.S. Attorney's Office is the federal office that prosecutes them.
And
But
then,
when you all work on a case together, do you work it with the local Commonwealth's attorney or with the AG?
okay.
Yeah.
We have a anti-human trafficking coordinator. Her name is Erin Kolba. She is an assistant attorney general, along with being the anti-human trafficking coordinator. She sits on all the task forces. She does work investigations with local law enforcement. She will collaborate with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the local Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They all work together. The feds, state, and locals work together. And how they determine, I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. My master's is in public administration, and I'm an advocate.
Mine too.
I've been an advocate and a social worker the majority of my life. So,
A lot
the
of it
prosecution
too.
side of it is a little not my thing. I send a lot to Erin, but they do collaborate and determine
Yeah.
whether or not they're going to charge at the state level or at the federal level,
Or
depends on
both.
jurisdictions,
Or both.
yeah.
Okay, so, Susheela,
Susheela, yes.
with the locals, I've not talked with more than one Commonwealth's attorney who has actually tried a case.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that the Attorney General comes, if the Commonwealth's attorney allows it, comes to the locality and prosecutes those cases like they do other specialized cases, or is that not
We usually
correct?
leave it to the locals or
Yeah, the local Commonwealth Attorney's
the,
offices in their jurisdiction. So my understanding is that, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert on trafficking, but my understanding is that the federal U.S. Attorney's Office or the federal prosecutors would work with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office and determine if there's enough resources. That's part of it, determining resources for being able to investigate and prosecute. So if the Commonwealth's Attorney's jurisdiction has more resources in that particular case to prosecute, maybe that would only be a state case. If there are both and the feds have enough resources, maybe both of those things would be happening at the same time. And with the feds, you might be talking about a larger jurisdiction and cross jurisdictions that are beyond that particular Commonwealth's Attorney's jurisdiction.
And last question. With the funding cuts on the federal level, are they having an impact, or is the cut having an impact on human trafficking already?
My husband's a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia. He's the criminal supervisor. And they are having an effect throughout their offices on all types of crimes that they're prosecuting.
So we can expect a shift to more local resources being used as opposed to federal resources. if
I
we want
think
to get
that's
into these
likely.
cases.
I think that's very likely. I mean, we've all been hearing, there was the federal shutdown that happened. You know, they apparently reached a budget deal, but we are in crisis mode, right? We're dealing with the sequestration and trying to limit the impact of that, and yet have a budget for next year. So all of those things trickle down to the individual U.S. attorney's offices and FBI and, you know, ICE and everyone else who is part of a larger federal agency. So, yeah, I think that's safe to say that more of the brunt's going to fall on the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. But again, the disclaimer that I am not a prosecutor. I deal with civil legal issues, which is what we're going to be talking about mostly today. How I would be, personally, how I would be dealing with trafficking is potentially doing a trafficking visa application for a particular client who's a domestic or sexual violence victim.
And you have some really good questions, and if you want to send me an email, my card is in there, I will get you over to Erin so she can answer some of your questions.
Well, she came here and did a training, but that was right as the cuts were about to kick in, and I wanted to see how.
And she may have some more answers now that everything has changed, she may have some more answers, because she does work with every group out there. So definitely, if you want, or if you send her a direct email, I mean, if you send it to me, I can get it to her, that's not a problem. But she may be a good place to start with getting some of your questions answered and
Thank
making
you.
sure, and if you want, you know, part of the task force for the investigations and prosecutions side of the task force, as you're the Commonwealth attorney, we could hopefully get you.
For a few more days.
Or your office. For the, make sure they're involved in that, so, you know, if there is something happening here in Martinsville area, that the right people are at the table with the investigating and prosecuting, and the right decisions get made, investigations go forward. So if you want to, like I said, send information, I'll get it to Erin, and she will. She's a very busy woman, but she's pretty good about responding back as soon as she can.
Okay, thank you.
So we are going to talk about protective order legislation, some of the changes that happened. Some of this might be a reminder really to you all about the changes, some big changes that happened in 2011, and then some updates on laws that changed in 2012 and 2013. And I'm talking about state laws, Virginia's General Assembly and their processes. So just as an overview, we're getting ready to start a new General Assembly. It will start on January 8th. This is going to be a long session, which is an 8-week session. That means they're going to be doing a budget. We have a new governor coming into office. So the current governor is presenting his budget, and that's the beginning of the process. So are you all aware that in 2011 there were some big changes to the protective order legislation, including basically making the relief and the behavior that is necessary to get a protective order the same, whether you have a family or household member relationship or not. Are you aware of those changes? So I see some nods, but maybe not everyone's nodding, so I'll just review a little bit. And you should have a PowerPoint document that it says protective order legislation in parentheses 2011, and then including 2012 and 2013 updates. Does everybody have that? All right, so that's what I'm going to be working from. And basically, the changes that happen cover, mostly what I'm going to be talking about is family abuse protective orders, the types of protective orders that would be seen in juvenile and domestic relations court, JDR court. and general district court, the non-family protective orders, non-family household member protective orders. All of them, emergency, preliminary, and full. So some of the changes are best described by this awesome one-page sheet that I passed out. It should be in your folder. It looks like this. It's supposed to be blue, but my copier as a nonprofit made it this ugly gray-green color. But I feel like this is an excellent way to sort of easily get your head around the changes that happened in 2011. And those are that there's one standard for getting a civil protective order. So you have to have shown that there is an act involving violence, force, or threat that results in bodily injury or a threat of bodily injury, sexual assault, or death. Effectively, that's the behavior that we're talking about. Whether you have a family or household member relationship or not, if you can prove that behavior, you should be able to get a protective order. And as this sheet indicates, on the left-hand side of the sheet, if you have the family or household member relationship, you go on the left-hand side of the sheet, that's J&DR court. And as you can see, there are a few different types of relief that are available. And why would you think that would be the case, that there'd be different relief available for a protective order for family or household members, as opposed to people who are who don't know each other, or who are neighbors, who are not in an intimate partner relationship?
Basically for that reason. If you live with someone, you need different protections than someone who you don't know is stalking you.
Right. It's the intimate partner relationship part. It's the aspect of being involved romantically with this person that may mean you've built a home together. You don't just live together, you've built a home together, you have finances together. If people have been involved for a long period of time, it may be that you've lived in this relationship for years and years and years, yet you don't have ownership of any of the property. Everything's entitled or titled in the abuser's name. That's a type of abuse, and that's a type of dynamic that J&DR court judges are equipped to handle and understand and tailor relief to. So, for example, a type of relief that's not, you could get it through the catch-all relief of protective orders, but it's not enumerated in the statute for the non-family abuse protective order, is suitable alternative housing, right? Putting, not turning off utilities, that kind of thing. Things that are based around the relationship. Custody, child support, those types of things, okay? So that should be reviewed. On the right-hand side is where you would go if you did not have a family or household member relationship. So those were huge changes that really derived from, if you remember the Yardley Love case, the UVA student who was killed by her ex-boyfriend. Under Virginia's law, she wouldn't have been able to qualify as a family or household member to get a protective order. At that time, she would have needed to get a stalking warrant out for his arrest in order to ask for a protective order. So that's one of the things that changed with this 2011 legislation. No more warrant requirement needed to get a civil protective order, whether you have the relationship or not. Does that make sense to people? All right. I'm going to so you have these materials, but I'm going to go pretty quickly through them. So on your slide 6, basically we're providing equal access to protective orders for victims of sexual assault, stalking, and dating, and equal enforcement, equal types of protections. So for example, on your slide, let's see, moving to slide, right, slide 13, that's just an iteration of how you get this protective order. It emphasizes that you don't need the warrant. Moving on to slide 17. So now there are consistent violation penalties, right? Whether you violate the Family Abuse Protective Order or the General District Court Non-Family Abuse Protective Order. Same types of misdemeanor and felony penalties. And what else? Pro-arrest measures. So what are the pro-arrest measures? I know the Commonwealth's attorneys, folks should know this. But basically, these are the types of provisions such as no contact, violating the no contact provision, the no further family abuse. Those types of provisions going on the premises, these are the pro-arrest measures. What do you think I mean by that? Does anyone know? It means that law enforcement can arrest for that violation without having to go and get, that doesn't have to be a capias issued or a hearing scheduled first. At some point that will happen. But if law enforcement determines that there's probable cause, that the no contact provision, the no further abuse, or coming on the premises has happened, they can arrest and are supposed to arrest. So from the blank expressions, I'm concluding that maybe that doesn't happen so much.
It does.
It does.
Violation of
Okay.
protective order?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Wake up, guys! It's hard for me too.
If you notice, she said violation of protective order, and you said pro-arrest.
Right,
And I'm
that's a
sitting here
violation
thinking-
of a protective
I'm sitting
order.
here thinking, is she talking about a violation of protective order?
I'm talking about a violation of a protective order. So
I know
let me
you're
use
from the
myself
north
as an
and we're from the
example.
south, so our language may not match.
I guess. So if I have a protective order against my husband and he violates it by contacting me, I should be able to call the police and say, he's contacted me, and the police are supposed to be able to arrest him right away without me having to file a show cause or anything else to have that happen. Now, the hearing will have to happen, right, to see if he can be convicted of that violation. But that's what I mean by pro-arrest. It's not, we're not talking about the conviction yet. It's the police's responsibility to arrest.
Which gets passed off to the Commonwealth's attorney because the victim calls Vicky, Vicky comes to us, we file a show cause, and then we get into court.
Right, I understand that. But in terms of protection of the victim, that's where the concept of pro-arrest comes from. That
Yes.
the police are supposed to be able to act right away when certain types of violations happen, as opposed to, okay, so my husband was supposed to, in the visitation part of this protective order, my husband's supposed to bring the children back at 5 p.m. on Sunday, and he didn't bring them back until 8 p.m., and that happens every week. It's been happening over and over again. That's not the kind of thing that the police can arrest him for right away, even though that might lead to a conviction for a violation of a protective order, right? That's not the kind of thing that they're going to arrest him for. I would have to ask for a show cause hearing and hold that hearing, etc., and then there would be some penalty involved with that, or not, if you weren't convicted of it. Does that make sense? All right.